I don't work for Beijing. I don't work for Washington, D.C. I work for the Philippines, so I'm on the side of the Philippines.
Is China now your most important trading partner?
Yes, they are our largest, right now, they are our largest trading partner. The political issue was Marcos. And for us to defend ourselves politically, somebody had to enter politics.
I know you worked extremely hard today. I think I have seen you already 3 or 4 times, and I know we have had so many sessions.
Well, I could say the same for you, Mr. President. We've been together most of the day, and I'm very happy that we had this opportunity to have at least a chat about some of the issues of the day.
And congratulations on your elections. How many months have you been in office now?
I took office, inauguration was the 1st of July.
Yeah.
So more or less 6 months. 7 months now.
How has it been? As expected, or better or worse?
Well, pretty much as expected. I have the advantage of having spent years watching my father being president. So I had a very good idea of what it entailed. Now, of course, it's different from a son watching his dad doing his job as you yourself doing that job. So it's like I'm in the same setting, but playing a different role. But at least I know I know what needs to be done, and I have a fair idea how it used to be done anyway, and so I have models that I can follow, templates that I can follow.
But in your father's time, there was no social media.
No social media. Yes, that's actually in politics, I think, all around the world, not only in the Philippines, that suddenly social media has become such an enormous force, not only in politics, but in all other walks of life. So, yes, that is the new feature.
And I think maybe we could say that the world is more complex and confrontational now than back when your father was president, and more complex in the region? Yes,
because it was simpler then. For example, when you talk about foreign policy for a country like the Philippines, you choose. You were with the Americans or you were with the Soviet Union. That was still the Cold War. We were still in the midst of the Cold War. And so, yes, it was simpler then. But it's that kind of arrangement, or that kind of the spheres of influence, as we used to call them, I don't think applies anymore. However, we spoke about this in another session, and the forces that are sort of tending to push us back into this bipolar, I mean, not in a psychiatric sense, but bipolar world are quite strong. But I think most leaders and most strategists they have a consensus that we should not fall back into that kind of situation where all countries have to choose which side they will be on. So when asked which side are you on, I said, well, I don't work for Beijing. I don't work for Washington, D.C. I work for the Philippines. So I'm on the side of the Philippines, and that really translates into a very simple statement of foreign policy, which is I promote the national interest.
And the national interest also has led to the fact, I think you've been already in Beijing and
yes,
visited President Xi Jinping. Did your father go to Beijing?
My father went to, my family has quite a history with the People's Republic, because in 1974, I was 16 years old. My mother took me with her on the first visit to of Filipino delegation to China. And that was the precursor to the establishment of diplomatic relations. And so after that, we met with Zhou Enlai. We met with the Chairman Mao Zedong. Deng Xiaoping was number 3 then. So that's how it all began. The next year, my father brought a formal delegation because we were unofficial with my mother. He brought a formal delegation where they set the framework for the establishment of diplomatic relations between the PRC and the Philippines.
I guess a very different China you visited now than you visited in the 1970s.
Completely, and it's just absolutely remarkable what we saw in China in 1974, and what we saw, because after that there were many visits subsequent to the signing, especially of the diplomatic relations, but the rapid growth and modernization of China is just remarkable. I think everyone here is perfectly familiar with how that happened. But still, when you think of the time that it took them, for example, a place like Xiamen, when we first went to Xiamen, it was a little village. Even Guangzhou was like it was a small city, and now it's you could be in any of the great Western capitals in terms of sophistication, in terms of development, in terms of wealth. It has been absolutely remarkable to watch.
Is China now your most important trading partner?
Yes, they are our largest right now. They are our largest trading partner.
And the U.S. number 2, or?
The U.S. I think is number 3 now, if I'm not mistaken. Because especially since the pandemic, the alliances between our neighbors has become very strong. For example, the biggest contributor for foreign direct investment now is Singapore into the Philippines.
Wow.
And I think the next Japan and Korea are following on its heels. So it's very much a regional, because I think there has been a consensus amongst the Southeast Asian countries, Asia-Pacific countries, that we have to build these partnerships together. And the idea was really that because we need to encourage trade and to have these partnerships, because we are coming into an uncertain world with the post-pandemic global economy, and so those partnerships are strong. So we have been very active in ASEAN, APEC, to promote those partnerships, and that's why I think the balance in terms of trade and in terms of assistance has changed over the years.
I was quite surprised to hear that Singapore was number 1 on the FDI side, and you said second Japan and then Korea?
I think that's where we are now, but I think it's going to move.
But I expected maybe China among the 3, but maybe many Chinese companies invest through Singapore.
Yes, well, they invest everywhere. I mean, you know, before the pandemic, the economic activity of China in other places, because they were with the rapid growth that they had planned for themselves, the demand for resources, mineral resources, all kinds of different resources that they cannot produce as quickly as they needed. So they've gone to other areas for their supply. So it's been the same thing with the Philippines, especially at that period a few years back, where China was growing at 10% every year. 10 to 12%. In fact, there were years that they were saying that they were posting 12% growth. And that was the time that China was really hungry for all the different resources. Energy, for example, building materials, for example, minerals, for example. All of this was in high demand by the Chinese economy.
It is incredible that I think now Philippines is the fastest growing of the ASEAN countries.
I think in ASEAN, I think we're still the fastest growing.
Yeah, around 7-8%. But since China is also such an important market for you, how do you explain that when China now has been growing a bit slower, that you have maintained or created such an impressive growth? Because that's not the situation in the rest of the world, because the growth has been going down.
Well, it's a deliberate effort on our part, because when we look at the alarming numbers such as debt to GDP ratios in the Philippines, although I always say we are doing better than our neighbors, the numbers is 62%. It is now is still very high for us. So the strategy is to have high growth rates and to pull us out of that situation. And so we've done everything. First of all, after the pandemic, or as we came on, as the pandemic has begun to subside, the main concern were jobs. And that was one of the areas. And we concentrated on the MSMEs, the micro, medium and to medium-scale enterprises, micro, small, medium-scale enterprises, because that comprises such a large part of our economy. And it's the same in most ASEAN countries. And I think that's where the growth is coming from. So we were always very worried that of the talk that we were hearing on the forecasts on the international on the economies of different countries. And we kept hearing, especially later last year, we kept hearing about a recession that will be coming. So we kept looking very closely at our unemployment rate, which is now running at 4.2%, and this is coming down. And in fact, our unemployment rate now is lower than it was before the pandemic. So we estimate that we have created about 2 million jobs since then. So as long as in my theory, my belief, and I think I'm right in that, is that as long as the unemployment rate stays low, then the recessionary forces are something that we can resist. And so that's why I think that gives a good foundation for growth. But
what are the key growth areas?
Well, we have. Let me talk about the areas that did well during the lockdowns, the strict lockdowns in the pandemic, the past 2 years. One of the businesses that was business processing, the BPOs, that kept going simply because of the nature of the technology. People could work from home. The other area that has been very active and continues to grow is mining, that side of that part of the economy. We have been a traditional exporter, manufacturer and exporter of semiconductor products, of chips, and that continues to be an important factor. But the Philippines also has a very specific advantage in that we have approximately 10 million, maybe more, overseas workers that are working all over the world and who remit to their families, so that who remit money to their families. And that has been, in the times of real difficulty for the economy, that has really been a buffer for us. The remittances now comprise about 9% already of what the government is using to fuel this growth.
You also have a 7 decades long agreement with the U.S. on security. Is that something that you want to keep?
Oh, it's probably, I would say, not even more than 7 decades. It's been over a century in different guises. So that has evolved in very many ways. I mean, we started off as a Commonwealth of the United States earlier in the 20th century, and then further on We gained liberation after the war, after the Second World War, 1945. And so, but the connection between the Philippines and the United States has remained strong. And we are their only treaty partner in Asia. And so that has grown stronger and stronger. But it has to, I always say that the only way for it to remain strong and to remain relevant is to evolve that relationship. So it can no longer be simply what it was before. And the Philippines has changed, the United States has changed, the world has changed, and now we are living within the context of all of these other forces that are coming out, especially around the region, around South China Sea. So again, to be able to respond properly, we have to evolve these relationships. And I have to say that it continues to go. We are progressing along that evolution very well, and we are able to continue not only in terms of trade and in terms of diplomatic relationship. But beyond that, we have security arrangements with the United States, and that has come to the forefront. Whereas perhaps we were a bit on the back burner for a little while, that has again come to the forefront because of the increased tensions in our part of the world.
Yeah, and you mentioned the South China Sea. Is that something that keeps you up at night? The South China Sea situation, yes. Is that something that keeps you up at night?
Keeps you up at night, it keeps you up in the day, keeps you up most of the time. It's something, it's very dynamic. It's constantly in flux. So you have to pay attention to it and to make sure that you are at least aware of the present situation, so that you're able to respond properly. So it's well, we in terms of, let's say, cross-strait tensions, we're at the very front line. We are at the very front line, and so whenever these tensions increase, when the ships come out, the Chinese send their Coast Guard vessels, the Americans answer. We are watching as bystanders, and said if something goes wrong here, we are going to suffer. And that's why when asked what is your foreign policy and how would you describe it, I say it's a commitment to peace and hewing very, very close and guided very, very closely by our national interests, as I mentioned before.
Well, if I may, did the South China Sea complex come up in your conversations in Beijing with the President Xi Jinping?
There is no way to avoid it. There is no way to avoid it. We describe it I suppose in diplomatic language as one part of our relationship, but it is an important and unavoidable issue that we have to ventilate, and we cannot just put it, sweep it under the rug and pretend it's not happening, because there are effects, not only in the diplomatic sense, not only in the security sense, but even in the livelihood of our citizens. So it is unavoidable to speak about that, and I would not be doing my job if I did not bring up these issues with President Xi when I had the opportunity.
And what is your main concern related to this? Is that these islands, or is it your fishing vessels, or is it the principles for what defines what is Filipino territory and what is Chinese territory?
All of the above.
Okay.
All of the above.
Did I miss anyone?
All of those issues are open issues right now. So in terms of the territorial, let's say that we have no conflicting claims with China. What we have is China making claims on our territory, and that is how we approach the problem that we find. Because we've established our baselines. They were the baselines as was drawn out was given to the UN, and UNCLOS has accredited those baselines as the baselines of the Philippines. And we lived with them for many, many years without a problem, and suddenly things had changed. So I suppose China has some strategic concerns that have caused them to do this. So it is, again, we are always, if you have been listening to the ASEAN pronouncements, it is always the rule of law. It is always UNCLOS that we talk about, because it's not only the Philippines who has these issues with China amongst the ASEAN members, and so that is the approach. I mean, some people say even within the Philippines that we should do more. And I said, what do you want to do? Go to war? Nobody wants to go to war. We don't. China doesn't. The United States doesn't. So, but just having the tensions increase in the region already has an effect on trade, on all of the exchanges that we have within ASEAN, within the region, with China, with the United States, and now with the aggregations that are being formed with Australia, with Japan, with South Korea. Once again, these are the elements that now have made the situation there very, very dynamic, very, very complex, and we are hoping to simplify them as much as possible if we can. But they are not simple problems, and because of that, there are no simple solutions. And there are players that come in from everywhere, from Europe, the United States. So that is what we have to deal with in the region. However, there is also a unanimity of the belief amongst the leaders in ASEAN that we must be committed to the idea we call it Asian centrality, but it essentially boils down to the idea that the future of the region must be decided by the region. It cannot be decided by outside forces, by outside powers. And I think that has been a good guide for the foreign policy and our dealings with the superpowers.
You see, Japan has now committed to double their defense
spending
budget from 1% of GDP to 2% of GDP. Is that something you ran on too on your ticket, or is that something that you're reflecting on in the Philippines?
Well, I think to an extent, but not because the belief is that, first of all, there is no point the Philippines building up its armory. First, we are not in a economic situation that we are able to build up to the levels that the Americans have, to the levels that the Chinese have. And more importantly, perhaps, is our abiding belief that the solutions are not going to be military. And if they are going to be military, then they are not solutions, because it will end badly. If it goes that way, it will end badly for everyone involved, and even those who are not involved. And when I say that, I'm thinking of the war in Ukraine. We were quite, I think all of us were quite surprised, especially us in the Philippines, to think that the war in Eastern Europe would affect agriculture in the Philippines. And I guess it just goes to show how well connected that is. But like I say, if a similar situation would arise in the region, then it would be, actually, I would say it would be disastrous for the rest of the world as well. Not only for the region, but for the rest of the world.
Now, as you said, Mr. President, the way you see it is territorial claim on your territory that has been agreed on. So was there any understanding for that perspective when you were in Beijing?
Well, when I spoke to President Xi, I prefaced our discussion by saying we are not going to decide here today the issues that are between the Philippines and China in terms of territoriality. And so I chose to raise subjects, to raise issues that have a good possibility of actually being resolved. And these are the incidents that have been happening in the South China Sea between our Coast Guard, between the Chinese Coast Guard, between our fishing boats, and of course, every so often the American vessels, the American Navy that comes in when they feel that they have to project a presence in the area. So that precludes the possibility of just saying, look, we come to an agreement between the two of us, and we'll take away all the issues there. As we keep coming back to the fact that it has become terribly complex and very, very dynamic, and requires a good deal of attention.
Mr. President, coming back to the economic potential of the Philippines, as you said, you have a young population. You also saw during the lockdowns that there were possibilities to work from home. People are tech savvy. If you look at, for example, like South Korea and other nations in the region, they've leapfrogged from a certain point. Do you see a possibility now in the years to come that the Philippines can really leapfrog and take the step into a situation where you could follow some of your most successful neighbors?
Well, we sincerely hope so, and I think that is a distinct possibility, simply because we also hold a great deal of, we also recognize a great deal of potential in the new technologies in terms of course, in the economy. And the advantage that we have, that the new tech has, is that it is not like the traditional industries where you have to slowly build it up over the years. You come, you have a problem, you engage new technologies and bring it on. And you don't need to buy second-hand technology. You can buy the state-of-the-art immediately. So that's the leapfrog, is you come from very old tech, and you go straight to the cutting edge of technology. So that, I think, that is also, I think, what South Korea was the first highly digitalized country in Asia, and followed by many of our other neighbors in ASEAN. It is a central tenet of the development strategy of ASEAN and of all the member countries in ASEAN.
What do you think are the main obstacles today that you will look at? Is it infrastructure? Is it quality of education? Is it R&D? Is it red tape? Is it taxes? Is it fiscal stability, or all above?
I guess it's again all of the above. But what the approach that the Philippines has taken is our lessons learned, the hard lessons learned from the lockdown, from the pandemic, from the height of the pandemic, where it became very, very clear where the weaknesses were. In terms, for example, we talked about agriculture, in terms of agricultural production, in terms of distribution, in terms of supply and pricing as well. The areas in infrastructure, I think we have made the commitment, and I am confident that with that commitment, and we follow through on that commitment, that our infrastructure development will proceed apace, and that is something that we have control over, simply because these are government projects, and we are again promoting PPPs even in the especially in the infrastructure projects, because these are big ticket programs. So that is one area. The other ones, in my view, are the for example, are the systems and that we have in place, and the bureaucracy has a part to play in this, because the bureaucracy has been formed to respond to a different kind of economy. and a different kind of global economy as well. So the structural changes in the bureaucracy, for example, they're quite painful changes as well. Have to be made, and that is part of it. Digitalization is going to play a large part in that process. Again, but on the plus side, when I am asked why are you so optimistic about the future, and I always say, when what we have been given is that people say we have to recover. We got into this debt hole and we have to dig ourselves out of it. I say I don't really see it the same way. What I see is that we are reforming, reshaping the global economy, and that gives us an opportunity. It's not a clean sheet of paper, but maybe half clean sheet of paper where we can still design and draw, put down our ideas for what the global economy should look like. So, and the reason that I'm very, very optimistic and very confident of the future, and in fact, we have a sort of bet going with Madame Georgina of the IMF.
Okay.
In terms of, they predict a growth rate of 5% for the Philippines, and we said, well, our projection is 6.5%, and we're still hoping that we will be able to grow beyond that. And the reason that I'm so confident about that is because we have this workforce. We have a very, very good workforce in the Philippines. We have the youngest workforce in Asia. You might be surprised to learn that the average age of the Filipino worker is 23 and a half years old. So that is a huge demographic dividend. But demographic dividend is not paid out just as a matter of course. You have to develop. You have to develop now. Some of the concepts that we keep hearing about is upskilling and reskilling, and that's we have concentrated on. But again, the raw material in terms of our workforce is very, very advantageous. Our workforce is well trained. Our workforce is sophisticated, very English speaking. Quite in terms of technology, I would say that we are on equal footing as any other country. So that is where my confidence comes from, and that is the confidence that I hope to exude sufficiently to bring that confidence also to all of you and all of our potential partners in the world.
Well, thank you. It's been a fascinating discussion. I guess just to round off, how many years is it since your father left office?
34, in 1986. We left the Philippines in 1986. So,
Did you expect to come back as a president of your country?
Not as president. We were in exile for 6 years, so we weren't sure if we were coming back at all, physically coming back. My father never made it back. He died in Hawaii. So that, yes, that was a very trying time. Those were dark days for the family, and I dare say even for the country.
But you didn't have an ambition to become a president of your country back then.
Well, I need to explain this to people that as I was coming out of schooling, out of university, I avoided politics. I was determined not to go into politics. I said, why will I go into politics? My father has done everything in politics, and the life is difficult. And I could see the sacrifices that he had to make to get to do a good job. And I said, yeah, maybe that's not what I'm meant to be doing. But after we came back from the United States, after exile, when we were first allowed to come back, the political issue was Marcos. And for us to defend ourselves politically, somebody had to enter politics and be in the political arena, so that at least not only the legacy of my father, but even our own survival required that somebody go into politics. And so upon arrival in 91, the following election was in 92, I immediately ran for congressman in our province and House of Representatives. And, you know, like I always say, it's not where this is. If you had asked me when I was 23, 24, 25 years old, will you enter politics? Before you finished asking the question, I've already said no. No. But, you know, life takes you to certain, to places that you did not expect. And so once I was entrenched in the political arena, I said, well, if you're going to do this, you better do it well.
You better be president.
Well, every lieutenant wants to be a general, right? Every clerk wants to be the CEO. So I'm saying, if I'm going to be in politics, let's do the best we can and take it as far as we can take it. So we just never stop. But you know, this is your career now. So work hard at it and do it well. Do it as the best that you can. And I was blessed that the Filipino the voting population, the voters, Filipino voters, agreed with the message that we put out during the campaign, and returned a very strong mandate for the presidency.
No, congratulations on that, and also thank you for sharing this with us here today, and thank you for coming to Davos. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you very much.